So, hello everyone, and my name is Emmanuel Mappus. I'm a storyteller from France. And today we host the webinar Tales, Myth and Legend, How They Nourish Us with Nicolas Nédélec. Bonjour Nicolas.
Hello Emmanuel, bonjour Emmanuel, bonjour à tous.
And this webinar is part of the European program Stories in Motion. This is Stories in Motion, co-funded by Erasmus+. Thank you, Erasmus+. And we have a series of webinars this year. One happened last month about digital storytelling. And we have today a second one and two more in autumn 2022. Stories in Motion is a project about the use of storytelling as an educational tool in adult education. So now we will listen to Nicolas Nédélec from the French magazine La Grande Oreille. Here, the last example of La Grande Oreille. The next will arrive soon. And after having listened to Nicolas, we will have the chance to ask questions to Nicolas through the chat windows. So I don't know if I have to say it, but we mute the microphone, and just for your information, we are from people from 10 countries. At that webinar, we have people from Hungary, Czech Republic, Ecuador, Greece, North Macedonia, Serbia, Bulgaria, France, Italy, and Estonia. So, hello again, Nicolas. My first question is, could you present what is your job at La Grande Oreille, and what is the French magazine La Grande Oreille?
Yes, of course. So thank you for your invitation, and thank you everybody for being here. I'm very happy to share with you my experience with La Grande Oreille and with the using of tales and storytelling. La Grande Oreille is a French quarterly magazine. It exists since 1999, and its main objective is to talk about our society, actual society, contemporary subjects through traditional tales, myths, and legends. It has been created by a famous storyteller and writer in France, Henri Gougaud, and Olivier Poubelle, which is an organizer and a producer of shows, and at that time of storytelling shows. So the magazine has has known a big evolution since its beginnings. At first, it was only one topic per issue, and now we have since like 15 years we have one main topic in each issue, and also different articles about subjects linked to society, social subjects, but also history of tales, myths, legends, portraits of storytellers, and the using of speech and the importance of speech in society. It's really modern and interesting today, because also with the internet, speech is nowadays, and we are an example now, speaking from long distances and seeing each other. So speech has become a very important thing to master. So there is on one side speech, which is coming again and is needed for relationships, master of speech, and another the tales, myths, legends, who represent a memory of humankind and some messages that are different from what our rational and practical society propose to us. So through these stories, we have a different lightning on subjects, and that is what interests us the most with La Grande Oreille. Enlightening subjects through very ancient and shared stories. Emmanuel.
So yeah, thank you very much. And you said that La Grande Oreille is about the speech in general, so the actual speech. And of course, you link it with the ancient speech, memories, which are tales, myths, and legends. So can you then tell us more about what are tales, myth, and legend? Or you can choose one of the three, or tell me. I mean, I'm personally interested with tales, but tell us, what is it for you?
What is it? So we sometimes forget that literacy is something very recent in human history. 80, I think, if I remember well, like 80% of humankind is literate only since 100 years.
So
approximately.
you mean written?
Written, yes. I say alphabetization.
All right.
And if you compare that to the first pictures in the caves, they come from like in Grotte Chauvet in France, but there are a lot of examples in Spain, in Australia, New Zealand. You have caves with pictures dated more than 32,000 years. And what they represent is so much detailed that you have to admit that they were the support for something that they told orally. So the story of stories, if I can tell you that, the story of our myth is very ancient and much more ancient than what we have on written form. And if we refer to the first written tales that we got, there are two examples. For example, you have the tale of the two brothers. It's a famous tale that has been found in the Chaldean sands in Egypt, and it's more than 3,000 years. And what is fascinating is that this tale is very well known. You can find it in Grimm's tales, on other tales. So there is a sense of continuity, of transmission, and we can say that tales from ancient tales are parents from new tales. So there is a brotherhood, not an affiliation between the tales. You can also take a second example, which is an epic of Gilgamesh, which is very famous, and it's also approximately 3,000 years old. So,
which culture is Gilgamesh again?
It's in the Euphrates and Amur. It's like in Iraq now. It's it's east. So these tales are very ancient. You find in the story of tales ideas, manners to explore mankind that are linked together. So it's if you want to, sometimes when you study a subject and you don't have a clear understanding using the rational tools, when you don't have, you ask specialists, and you seem to be blocked. Using the tales is a way to have a different light. I see it like a spark in the dark, something from a step away from what is the main way to see things. To understand phenomena of mankind, you have to take different paths. And these stories is a path that I find very interesting to explore. And when you talk of tales, many people think today of that they are for children, or that they are tales of Grimm, for example, or Disney. or that they come from Perrault, Afanasieff. So very few collectors or makers of stories. But in fact, there has been a lot of the ethnologists have recorded, written, especially in the 19e siècle,
19th century.
In the 19th century, a lot of stories that you can find. For example, in France, we have this. It's very useful for us. It's De la Rutenaise, le conte populaire français, so popular tales from France, and it's like a Bible of stories.
Yeah,
and
it is a Bible, yes.
Yes, it's our Bible, and you have a typology of stories, and it is inspired from a typology that comes from a Finland guy who wrote a typology in the beginning of the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, which is an international classification of tales. And when you went, it's named Arne Thompson Uther. Mm-hmm. And when you enter in this world of stories, you find a world to explore with what is very fascinating is that you get the sense that the question behind the tales is so much human that you find the same type of tales in different cultures, different countries. And we can imagine that man going out from Africa has brought with him in his head stories and has made with him travels of stories. So man has traveled, stories have traveled with him. So also the travel of stories is something very interesting to take into account, because it's a link between people without the frontiers of culture. You can go, you can cross the borders with stories.
Mm. So you, Nicolas, thank you. A very passionate talk, and you said storytelling they are very ancient, and then that some ethnologists mostly in the 19th century, they have taken this oral culture and put it in words in order to save it, I would say. And do we know who created the stories? You talked about it comes from every part of the world, from the human needs. Do we know who created or imagined those stories?
We don't know, because it comes far behind the invention, far before the invention of writing. So it's about oral transmission. So how could we know who invented the stories? We can, using a very interesting methodology which has a brotherhood with genetics, we can trace, and we will publish in next issue of La Grande Oreille an article about this. It's especially Julien Duy. He studies stories like if he with the tools of comment on appelle ça, de la
genealogy.
No, de la genetics, from genetics.
Okay.
You know, in genetics, you can study the trees of evolution, comparing some sequences of DNA, and you know that we have a lot in common with the mammifers. We have like 90, 98, 99% in common. But when you study the little differences, you can say, okay, finally we know that, but it's for the example. But a monkey is very next to us, but donkey is a little bit before, and we can making the
link.
The link. When you compare a sequence of genetics, if you have a lot in common with another species, this species is near you, and if you have a little bit more differences, it's a little bit farther. Okay, so and you can do the same with stories, and that's the methodology of Julien Douy. He will. Using the collect of stories from all over the world, compare some parts of the same type of story and saying that this part of the story is like pretending this part of the story is like a part of DNA. So he will compare, and with the help of computers, he will construct a tree with more difference is more ancient, and more proximity is nearer to us with a certain culture. What is very interesting is that when he does this tree, it gives us an idea of the travel of mankind on Earth. So it's a way to respond to you. You ask, who created it? We don't know, but we can track, we can construct, we can imagine how it came to us and where it does come from.
All right, and now it's a great transition for my next question. So how it came to us. So now we are not anymore in the cave, and a lot happened till those stories were created, imagined when they were born. And what are the uses of storytelling today, apart from the storytelling shows? But what are the uses of tales, etc., in nowadays written and connected society?
There are a lot of possible uses. I can give you a few examples that I have noted that I find interesting. For example, because it is at first oral, it's oral nature, because we talk about stories coming from oral tradition. You can use them at school. So it's about children, but also it's about the teachers, and it's about the school culture. You know, in our societies, we tend to put written culture before oral culture. But as I said, our transition to written culture is at the level of mankind very recent. And I find it very interesting to use these tales at school, because if you think, you realize that the first contacts of the little baby in the belly of the mother is hearing the voice of our mother, is hearing our first sense activated to communicate with the outside is hearing, and then speech by imitating. So that's the most important thing for the little baby, is that the parents tell stories, and they don't write, they tell orally, directly, and that they tell nursery rhymes, all the traditional oral forms. So when you ask, where are these forms? Because we are in a literate society, the relationship between the family, the parents, the mother, and the children, which is the first contact with the world, is oral. So it is linked with oral tradition. And I can just say a few words about a project that I coordinated during 2 years. It was a European project. Its name is Seeds of Tellers. And in 5 European countries, we proposed to use traditional tales at school to encourage children to talk, and we put, following the method created by an ethnolinguist, which is Suzy Platiel. We put the children in circles and invited them to tell traditional stories. And it works. It's very interesting method because it helps them to create mental images because they don't have the support of a written, of a picture, of a written text. So they have to tell the stories with their own words. And they have also, the second interesting thing is that they learn to listen actively to the others. And that's very needed in our societies, being able to actively listen to the others. So I have a great faith on this type of method at school. And it's emerging now. And what's interesting also is, for example, in Italy, in France, I guess in other countries, there is a sense in national education that we need to have more place, to give more place to the education to talk. And our conviction is that we need to begin as soon as possible. The difficulty is that the teachers don't have the cultural habits around this type of method, but we will continue to talk about this and to convince people to use tales to have the habit to talk. I could talk about this project during 2 hours, so I will talk about other things.
Yeah, just I have the leaflet of the Seeds of Taylor, and which is also Erasmus Plus, and I recommend this method. I'm using it at school, and the beauty of it, if I may, is that as a storyteller and trainer, I will transmit this this tool to the teachers, and after it works alone, and then it is spreading like tales are spreading in general. So this was a project in the educational sector. Do you have other example of uses of tales?
Yes.
You would like to share?
I have a little example which is a little bit non attendu, a little bit original, is about, just for school, about mathematics. I just read a book about from a French mathematician. His name is David Bessis. It's very interesting because he says that the main faculty, the more important thing to have, to cultivate when you study mathematics is imagination. And I take that example, but because it's a little bit the continuation of the other example. Mathematics is imagination. People think that it's logic, because logic is logical language. It's written culture also. But the professional mathematicians know that the writing comes after the imagination. And reading tales, telling tales helps to make imagination work. Why? Because in tales, you don't have very psychological situation, clear things. The magic of tales is that inside tales there is a lot of emptiness, and you have to complete the emptiness with your mind. So viewing, when you tell a story, when you are making storytelling with a tale, you need to have mental images. You need to construct a movie inside your head. And believe me, when you listen to certain very good storytellers, it's an experience more extraordinary than going to the movie, because a storyteller that can put you into a purely imaginary world makes you the actor of the story. So you don't have the passivity when you have the image that is imposed to you, but you construct the image. So that's about imagination and mathematics. And also, common point with mathematics is that the way your position to mathematical problems is that you have an enigma, something not resolved, an initial situation, and you don't know the solution. But but you don't have solution. And if you compare with the travel of the hero inside myths or tales, the hero of the tale has the same type of problem. He's in an initial situation with a problem, loss of his parents, being alone, all having a big problem, big trouble. So he has to find the solution, like the child or bigger, who needs to find the solution of the mathematical problem. So, and at the end, he has to resolve all the difficulties. At the end, we find a new situation, which is happy in the fairy tale. And also, mathematician at the end of his process has a new situation, which is a solution for him. So there is an analogy between the travel of the hero and the la démarche and the way when you have in face of the mathematical problem, the way you have to behave and to think. Another example?
Yes, just to mention, I will send to by email the reference that Nicolas is talking about. So, yeah, please continue,
yes.
Nicolas.
Yes, I will be happy to share these references. And also, tales. I will take now a purely different example. Tale and speech are also a way to welcome the other and connect to the others. Of course, writing has a lot of limits in that way. And I remember when I went, for example, looking for projects in prison. I have followed one day some storytellers and librarians that did interventions in prison. And I went to a prison near Paris, which is a Prison de Fresnes. It's a very big prison. And so they had this project to make cultural animation with storytelling in the prison. There is a storyteller, Pepito Matteo, in France, who said to me one day that the storyteller is like the parachutist of culture. So he needs nothing. He just jumps. He has the stories in his head. He knows his stories, and voila. And it was interesting to see that in action in this place, because the prison couldn't be using the storytelling, transform the prison in something else. And I saw different prisoners coming from different cultures, Asians, Africans, people from Eastern Europe, very different people, French, and together telling stories that they chose. So the librarian and the storyteller at first came to tell stories to the prisoners. At first, they were not interested. They just wanted to participate to an activity, to have some free time, not being in the cell, of course. But because the tales telling a story is an opening to the other, because when you tell a story, a traditional tale, you don't have explanation to everything. You don't have solutions. You have questions. What is at the heart of storytelling? I said it's emptiness, and because there are a lot of emptiness, there are a lot of unresolved questions. I guess these unresolved questions come from, as I said before, from the childhood of humanity. So it has a power to fascinate, to interest, to people that is beyond what we guess when we don't know the subject. So I saw that in action. I don't want to make I don't want to seem making je voudrais pas faire trop l'éloge, quoi, comment on peut dire ça. Je voudrais pas en faire trop, mais
yeah, you don't want to say too much that storytelling can resolve everything, maybe.
Yes, but in that case, in prison, I saw prisoners telling tales, making a very special moment and listening to each other, and it was a very special time outside all the time, and being able to speak to each other is most important thing, to link to the other with these stories that project us outside present time and actual places. It's these stories, because they work with imagination and what is very archaic in us, project us together in fantasy places, other places, and have a very are very powerful in this way. And I remember a storyteller, Ludovic Suleiman. He also goes in prisons. He's a great storyteller, yes.
Yeah.
He does a lot of things. And he told us one day he went into other prison, and he told his stories. He talked with the prisoners different times. And one day, at the moment the prisoners came back into their cell, one said, "Oh, I need 5 minutes to tell a story to Ludovic." They asked, the prison accepted. So storytelling can make miracles.
Yeah.
And he told the story to Ludovic. And the story is this one. The man said, told a story about a king. It was the story of a king with his servant. And the king had a lot of trouble. One time he got sick, and the servant said, "It's for the best. Don't worry, it's for the best. You will see, today you are down, but tomorrow you will be up." And other day he loses a battle, and the servant say, "It's for the best." And another day he can't eat because the meat is too cooked. Say, "Don't worry, it's for the best. You will eat better tonight." And at one time, the king gets very, very angry to the servant and puts him in prison. And to have a little fresh air, he goes outside his kingdom, outside his castle, on his horse, of course. He enters into a forest, and then there are savage people that prisoner him, catch him, and they say, "We are going to kill you and to make a ritual, and we will eat you and kill you." And of course, I forgot a very important step in the story. So, on rembobine.
Yes.
Before putting the servant to jail, the king hurt his hand, and there was blood linking on his hand. And the servant said, "It's for the best." That was the last time before going to prison. So now I go to the future, to the present, and the king is being captured. And at the moment, the savages want to kill him, to sacrifice him. They see the scar on his hand and the blood. They say, "No, we can't kill him. He's impure. We have to leave him." So he's left alone in the forest. He goes back to his castle, and he frees his servant and thanks him and says, "You were right. You saved me. I'm sorry. You were right about the blood and on the hand." And the other said, thank you, my king. You saved me. The prison saved me. Why? I didn't save you. You saved me. You saved me because if you didn't put me in prison, I would have been with you outside in the forest, and we would have been killed, two of us together. So Ludovic was very troubled by the story because the prisoner telling his story, he must have been thinking about this story, hearing Ludovic, and through the different moments, he heard stories, feeling this story going up, and until the absolute need to tell it to the storyteller. So it's I think it's a nice anecdote to make you understand the power of symbolical power of stories, and also the power of making relationships between people. It's a tool for humanity, storytelling and tales. I would say that.
Thank you, Nicolas, for all those examples. I was listening to you very carefully, and thank you for telling a story. Now the story can maybe continue its traveling. Should we ask if people want to ask questions? Is the time now? It's okay for you, Nicolas? So now we have Nicolas, passionate about tales. Tales are everywhere and very ancient and also very new in a way. And anyone present in the chat would like to ask a question, writing, type it down. I don't know if you have the possibility to open microphone. I am not so much specialist in that. So I had a question, but what was that question? So many questions. So yes, okay, one question. LF, could you recommend us a story in these difficult days? Or even what kind of stories should we tell nowadays that can help overcome fear, doubt, suffering, and insecurities about future? So any tales around fear, insecurity, future?
Yes, what is interesting is that that question is the question that will make our next issue of La Grande Oreille.
Ah, great.
We decided to send to some storytellers and some artists that precise question. In these times of blur, in this moment with indistinct path, we don't know what will happen in the future. What story can, for you, can guide us, guide you, because stories are our friends. What which friend would you convey to be with you, with us, and to help us? And that's listening to this question makes me, yes, interests me. I have asked the questions, but not really thought about a story in particular. But I remind now a story that maybe could help. It's a legend, and I try to tell you in summary. It's a story about a village, and there was a plague in that village, and the death came to the village, and death encounters the first villager, and the first villager asks death, "Why are you here? What are you going to do to us?" And the death says, "There is a plague in the country, and it's going to to infect or to kill everybody in the village. So I'm here to collect every one of you. And the guy says, no, you can't come to here. Please let us live a little more. Come back later. And sometimes in tales it happens. Death accepts to go back and to leave the villagers. And a few times later, Death comes back, and everybody is dead already. And when Death asks why all the souls have been directly out of the village to another world, there is some last survival people that tell it's fear that killed us all. So it's a little, it's a story that is not very hopeful, but it says for me that there is nothing worse than fear. So sometimes also tales help us and stories helps us to resist to fear, because they make a form, they give a form to our fears. They materialize our fears. We don't keep them hidden somewhere in a, I don't know, our subconscious. We make a form, we can put them outside of us, we can examine them at the outside, and we can share our fears with other people. So yeah, that's why this story interests me.
Yeah, if I may, there are many stories about fear, and it starts from very young children, because the children, they exactly need to touch the fear, and you have it's like a tale. It's from we're going on a bear hunt from, I don't remember who is the video, very nice. We're going on a bear hunt, and then the hero will touch the fear and then go back. And the fear in that tale is a bear, and bear is a bit linked with a country that is very present in our actuality now. And there's a lot. Tell.
Sorry, Emmanuel. I just want to compensate the story I told. I really think that stories are little lights, and we need them to like little lights that enlighten the path. That I continue your example, please.
No, it's I don't want to take the floor, but there are a lot of stories and around fear. I'm telling the story of Jean sans peur, John without fear, and in the end, for me, what stays is when he is resuming, summing up what happened to him. He said, in the end, it is the le rire, the laugh killed the dragon. This is one example. It stayed to me. And I just want to come back to what you said, that stories, they are friends. So any kind of stories you can tell to someone will help in those moments, like in every moment of life. And it also depends from you. You choose a story that touches you, like this prisoner, and it will do something to the listeners. So there is thank you for that question from, it was from Lila, yes. And then we have another question from Maria from Greece. What is the scene in storytelling in France? And do you have difficulties? Thank you, Sadila. Okay, do you have, so back to Maria's question, what is the scene in storytelling in France? Do you have difficulties entering in school for performing? So it's about performing.
The scene of storytelling in France, it's shared between professionals and amateurs. There are a lot of amateur storytellers, and the professional storytellers have a Emmanuel, you're freezed. So do you hear me? I don't know if you hear me now. Okay, so I continue. So the professional storytellers belong to an organization with labeled APAC, Association Professionnelle des Artistes Conteurs, and they coordinate and they unite, they make meetings every year. But there are a lot more amateur storytellers. Where do they tell? So there is a theaters for the professional ones, and for the amateurs, not only the theaters, a lot of schools, because school is a very big place for storytellers. And for the amateurs, they go to schools, they make festivals, they organize festivals also with professionals. So there are different places for storytelling and different type of storytellers. But I think amateur storytellers are very important, because at the root of the word amateur, you have the word aimer, love, like. So they really have, some of them I really love the stories. And sometimes what I regret is that amateur storytellers are more fond of traditional stories, and professional storytellers tend to tell more modern stories, in the sense of they don't have all the time rich symbolic content, but they tend sometimes to have a factual narrative content. And I think it corresponds to a need on the market of work, but I would suggest to really use that material of traditional storytellers, myths, legends, which have a very strong symbolic content.
Thank you for that question. I have been offline for a few seconds, so I think now is the time to close this webinar. Already we're talking more than 45 minutes. So thank you very, very much to Nicolas. Thank you, Nicolas, says Maria. This webinar was meant to happen in 2020, and then we had a kind of a virus, everybody knows. And so we survived to this virus, and I'm really happy that your word are coming from 2 years now, because they were already in the air, and now we were online. And thank you for all my colleagues of Stories in Motion, Carmine, Isabelle, Effie, Lila, and Mafalda. And thank you for the listeners. And thank you for to La Grande Oreille. Again, this was during the COVID about speech. And last logo from Stories in Motion. I would send by email the references in a few days. So the last word to Nicolas.
Thank you very much for your invitation and for listening to me. And if you have more questions, don't hesitate to transmit them to me through Emmanuel. I will be happy to respond to you. And it's a nice thing that we can talk about these subjects in places like this, through the borders that separates us. So thank you, everybody.
Great, thank you. Have a nice weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.